The rain started just as Hannah Zimmerman noticed the dog limping through the muddy streets of Snowflake, Arizona, blood trailing from its paw with each painful step it took through the downpour. She had been sweeping the wooden porch of her small boarding house when she spotted the animal, a brown and white shepherd mix with matted fur and ribs showing through its sides, and something in her chest tightened at the sight of such suffering on this cold October afternoon in 1882. Without a second thought, she set down her broom and stepped off the porch, her boots squelching in the mud as she approached the injured creature with her hands outstretched and her voice soft. "Easy there, boy," Hannah said gently, crouching down despite the rain soaking through her gray cotton dress. "I am not going to hurt you." The dog looked up at her with exhausted brown eyes, too tired and hurt to run, and when she extended her hand for him to sniff, he merely whimpered and lowered his head. Hannah carefully scooped up the animal, surprised at how light he felt, and carried him back to her boarding house. She pushed through the front door with her hip, calling out to her elderly boarder, Mrs. Patterson, that she would be in the back room. The boarding house was modest but clean, with 6 rooms upstairs that Hannah rented to travelers passing through Snowflake. She had inherited the property from her uncle 2 years ago, when she was just 20 years old, and had been running it on her own ever since. The work was hard and the hours long, but it was hers, and that meant everything to a woman alone in the Arizona territory. Hannah carried the dog to the small room off the kitchen that she used for storage and laid him gently on some old blankets she kept there. The animal looked up at her with those same exhausted eyes, and she felt her heart break a little more. She rushed to the kitchen to fill a bowl with water and grabbed some scraps of beef from the icebox, then returned to find the dog exactly where she had left him, too weak to move. "Here you go," she murmured, setting the water down near his muzzle. The dog lapped at it weakly, and Hannah used the opportunity to examine his injured paw. There was a deep cut, likely from broken glass or a sharp rock, and she knew it needed to be cleaned and wrapped. She retrieved her medical supplies, the same ones she used when her boarders took ill, and set to work with careful, gentle hands. The rain continued to pound against the windows as Hannah cleaned the wound, speaking softly to the dog the entire time. He whined occasionally but did not snap or growl, seeming to understand she was trying to help. She wrapped his paw in clean bandages and offered him the beef scraps, which he ate slowly, as if he had forgotten what food tasted like. "You are safe now," Hannah told him, stroking his damp fur. "No one will hurt you here." She did not hear the knock at the front door over the sound of the rain, but Mrs. Patterson's voice calling for her made Hannah rise and brush off her wet skirt. She gave the dog one last pat and headed to the front of the house, where Mrs. Patterson stood near the entrance looking concerned. "There is a man at the door asking about his dog," the elderly woman said quietly. "Says it ran off this morning and he has been tracking it ever since." Hannah felt her stomach drop. She had assumed the dog was a stray, abandoned or lost, but if someone was looking for him, she would have to give him back. Still, she wanted to make sure this person was actually the owner and not someone looking to harm the animal. She squared her shoulders and walked to the door, where a tall man stood on her porch, rain dripping from the brim of his worn hat. He was probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy: denim pants, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and boots that had seen countless miles. He held his hat in his hands now, water running off the edges, and when he looked at Hannah, there was worry etched in every line of his face. "Madam," he said, his voice rough from calling into the wind, "I am sorry to bother you, but I am looking for my dog. brown and white shepherd about this tall, answers to Scout. Folks down the street said they saw you carrying an injured dog inside. Is he here? Hannah studied the man carefully, looking for any sign of cruelty or dishonesty, but all she saw was genuine concern. Still, she needed to be sure. If this is your dog, can you tell me how he might have been injured? The cowboy ran a hand through his wet hair, looking miserable. We were camped about 5 miles north of here last night. I am working for the Rocking R Ranch, moving cattle down from the high country before the snow comes. Scout must have stepped on something in the dark, because I woke up to find blood on his blanket. Before I could check him over proper, something spooked the herd and they started to scatter. By the time I got things under control, Scout was gone. I have been searching all day. His story rang true, and Hannah could hear the exhaustion in his voice. She opened the door wider and stepped aside. He is in the back room. He has a bad cut on his paw, but I have cleaned and bandaged it. Come in. The relief that washed over the cowboy's face was unmistakable. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. He stepped inside, removing his spurs first so as not to damage her wooden floors, and followed her through the house to the storage room. When Scout saw the cowboy, his tail began to thump weakly against the blankets, and the man dropped to his knees beside the dog with a sound that was almost a sob. "Scout, you damn fool dog," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You scared me half to death." Hannah watched as the cowboy ran his hands over the dog, checking him thoroughly while murmuring reassurances. The love between man and animal was obvious, and she felt her initial wariness melt away completely. This was no cruel owner. This was someone who cared deeply for his companion. "I gave him some water and a little beef," Hannah said quietly. "The cut was deep, but it should heal if you keep it clean and dry." The cowboy looked up at her, and for the first time Hannah saw him really see her. His gray eyes widened slightly, taking in her rain-damp dress, her long brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, the medical supplies still scattered on the floor beside the dog. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost reverent. "You did all this for a strange dog. A dog you did not even know belonged to someone." Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He was hurt and alone. I could not just leave him out there in the rain." The cowboy stood slowly, and Hannah realized he was quite tall, at least 6 feet. He held out his hand to her. "I am Ryan Rawlings." "And I am in your debt, Miss Hannah Zimmerman," she said, placing her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, and the handshake was firm but gentle. "And you owe me nothing, Mr. Rawlings. I am just glad Scout has someone who cares for him." "Call me Ryan, please," he said, still holding her hand. "And I do owe you. Scout here is more than just a dog to me. He was my father's before he passed, and he is about all the family I have left." There was a vulnerability in Ryan's admission that made Hannah's heart ache. She understood loss. She had lost both her parents to cholera when she was 16, and her uncle, who had taken her in, had died of a heart ailment just 2 years ago. Loneliness was something she knew intimately. "I am sorry about your father," Hannah said softly, reluctantly pulling her hand from his. "How long ago did you lose him?" 3 years now," Ryan replied, looking down at Scout. "He was a good man, taught me everything I know about ranching and horses. Scout was his constant companion, and when Pa died, the dog just naturally took to following me instead." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain still drumming on the roof, before Ryan spoke again. "Miss Zimmerman, I know this is asking a lot, but would you mind if Scout stayed here tonight? The ranch is another 10 miles south, and I do not think he is strong enough for that journey in this weather. I can pay you for boarding him, of course, and I would come back first thing in the morning to collect him." Hannah glanced at the dog, who had fallen asleep on the blankets, his bandaged paw stretched out before him. The idea of sending him back out into the cold rain, even in a wagon, made her uncomfortable. "He can stay," she said, "but I will not take money for showing simple kindness. Make sure he keeps off that paw as much as possible for the next few days and change the bandage daily." "I cannot just take advantage of your generosity," Ryan protested. "You have already spent your time and supplies caring for him." "Mr. Rawlings, Ryan," Hannah corrected herself when he looked at her pointedly. "I run a boarding house. I have rooms and supplies to spare. What I do not have is the ability to turn away someone in need, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Please, let me do this." Ryan studied her face for a long moment, and Hannah had the strange sensation that he was memorizing her features. Finally, he nodded. "You are a remarkable woman, Miss Zimmerman. Your kindness will not be forgotten." "It is just Hannah," she said, echoing his earlier request. "And I am only doing what anyone with a heart would do." "You would be surprised," Ryan said quietly, "how few people have hearts as good as yours." He stayed a few more minutes, making sure Scout was comfortable and giving the dog some gentle words of reassurance, before Hannah walked him back to the front door. The rain had lightened to a steady drizzle, and the sun was starting to break through the clouds on the western horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "I will be back at first light," Ryan said, settling his hat back on his head. "And Hannah, truly thank you. You have given me back something precious tonight." "Take care riding back," Hannah said. "The roads will be muddy." Ryan smiled at her then, a real smile that transformed his entire face from merely handsome to absolutely stunning. And Hannah felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold wind blowing through the open door. After he left, Hannah returned to Scout and sat with the dog for a while, stroking his fur and thinking about the cowboy with the storm-gray eyes. There had been something in the way he looked at her, something that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced in a long time. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, that she was just lonely and reading too much into a simple expression of gratitude, but the feeling persisted. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, a knowing smile on her weathered face. That was a handsome young man. "He was just looking for his dog," Hannah said, feeling her cheeks warm again. "Hum," the elderly woman said, not sounding convinced at all. "And the way he looked at you was just gratitude, I suppose?" "I do not know what you mean," Hannah replied, focusing intently on Scout's fur. "My dear girl," Mrs. Patterson said gently, coming to sit beside her on the floor with a small groan. "I may be old, but I am not blind. That young man looked at you like you hung the moon and stars, and unless I am very much mistaken, you looked at him the same way." Hannah wanted to deny it, but she had never been good at lying, especially to Mrs. Patterson, who had known her since she was a child. "It does not matter," she said instead. "He is a cowboy working for a ranch. He will collect Scout tomorrow, and I will probably never see him again." "Maybe, Mrs. Patterson said, patting her hand. "Or maybe not. The Lord works in mysterious ways, child. That dog running off and ending up on your doorstep, that young man coming here looking for him seems like providence to me." Hannah wanted to believe her, but she had learned not to hope for too much. Life in the Arizona Territory was hard, especially for a woman alone, and she had built her existence on practicality rather than dreams. Still, as she prepared dinner for her boarders that evening and checked on Scout one more time before bed, she could not help but think about Ryan Rawlings and the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her. She slept fitfully that night, her dreams full of storm-gray eyes and gentle hands, and woke before dawn with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread in her stomach. She dressed carefully, choosing her best day dress, a soft blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and took extra time with her hair, braiding it and coiling it into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow at breakfast but said nothing, merely smiling into her coffee as Hannah checked on Scout for the third time in an hour. The dog was much improved after a night of rest and steady food, his eyes brighter and his tail wagging when Hannah approached. "Your friend will be here soon," she told him, freshening his water bowl. "I bet you are eager to see him." Right on cue, there was a knock at the door, and Hannah's heart jumped into her throat. She smoothed down her skirt, took a deep breath, and went to answer it. Ryan stood on her porch looking much better than he had the night before. His clothes were clean, his hair was combed, and he had shaved, revealing a strong jaw and a small dimple in his chin. He held his hat in his hands again, and when he saw Hannah, his entire face lit up. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "I hope I am not too early." "Not at all," Hannah replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Scout is doing much better. I think he will be able to travel today, though you should probably take it slow." "About that," Ryan said, following her to the back room. "I spoke with my boss last night, explained the situation. He has given me a few days off to make sure Scout heals up proper. I was wondering if you might allow him to stay here a bit longer, just until that paw is fully mended. I would pay full boarding rates, of course, and I could come by twice a day to check on him and help with anything you need around the place." Hannah's heart was racing now. The practical part of her brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea, that spending more time with Ryan Rawlings would only lead to heartache when he inevitably left. But the lonely part of her, the part that had been starved for companionship and genuine human connection, was already nodding yes before she could stop herself. "I would be happy to keep Scout here," she said carefully, "but you do not need to pay me or feel obligated to help around the house." "I want to," Ryan said simply. "You have done so much already, and it would make me feel better to know I was contributing something. Besides, I saw that loose board on your porch step yesterday, and your front gate is hanging crooked. If you let me, I could fix those things and anything else that needs attention." Hannah thought about the long list of repairs she had been putting off because she could not afford to hire help. The leak in the roof over the third bedroom, the cracked window in the parlor, the back door that stuck every time it rained. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won. "If you are sure you want to," she said. "I admit I could use the help. But I insist on feeding you while you are here at least. It is only fair." Ryan's smile could have melted butter. "Deal," he said, extending his hand for her to shake. His hand was just as warm and strong as she remembered, and this time when their palms met, Hannah felt something pass between them, a spark of recognition that went deeper than mere physical attraction. She saw the same awareness flicker in Ryan's eyes, and when they released hands, it was with a reluctance that spoke volumes. Scout's greeting of Ryan was enthusiastic despite his injury, and the cowboy spent several minutes loving on his dog before checking the bandage with practiced hands. "You did a fine job with this," he told Hannah. "Better than most doctors I have seen." "My uncle taught me," Hannah explained. "He said a woman running a boarding house needed to know basic medical care, since you never knew when a guest might take ill or have an accident." "Smart man," Ryan said, carefully rewrapping the bandage. "Did he run this place before you?" "For 20 years, Hannah said, a fond smile crossing her face. "He was my mother's brother, and he took me in when my parents died. This boarding house was his whole world, and he made sure I knew every aspect of running it before he passed." "That must have been hard, losing him so young," Ryan said softly. "It was," Hannah admitted. "But he prepared me well, and I like to think I am making him proud by keeping this place going." I am sure you are, Ryan said, standing up and brushing off his knees. Now, how about you show me that list of repairs? They spent the rest of the morning going through the boarding house, with Hannah pointing out everything that needed fixing, and Ryan making notes in a small book he pulled from his pocket. He was thorough and professional, asking questions about when problems started and how bad they had gotten, and Hannah found herself relaxing around him, enjoying his easy manner and quick smile. By noon, they had a complete list, and Ryan had already started on the porch step, pulling up the loose board and examining the wood beneath it. Hannah brought him a glass of cool water and sat on the porch railing, watching him work. "You are good at this," she observed as he measured and cut a new board to size. "My pa made sure I could do just about anything around a ranch or a house," Ryan said, not looking up from his work. Said a man who could not fix what was broken was not much of a man at all. He sounds like he was a wise person. He was, Ryan agreed, a note of sadness in his voice. Stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery, but wise. I miss him every day. Hannah understood that particular kind of grief, the kind that never really went away but just became part of who you were. "What happened to him, if you do not mind me asking?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, fitting the new board into place and hammering it down with sure, strong strokes. "Kicked by a horse," he finally said. "Broke his ribs and one of them punctured his lung. He held on for 3 days, but there was nothing anyone could do. I was with him at the end, and Scout too. Pa's last words were to take care of the dog and to make sure I found a good woman to settle down with someday. Have you been looking?" Hannah asked, then immediately wanted to take the question back. It was too forward, too personal, but Ryan did not seem to mind. "Not really," he said, sitting back on his heels and looking up at her. "Most of the women I meet are either already spoken for or looking for someone with more money and prospects than a cowboy has to offer. I have kind of resigned myself to the bachelor life." "I find that hard to believe," Hannah said before she could stop herself. "You seem like exactly the kind of man a sensible woman would want." The look Ryan gave her was so intense that Hannah felt her breath catch. "Do you really think so?" "I do," she said honestly. "You are kind, hardworking, good with animals, and you clearly loved your father. Those are all qualities worth having." "What about you?" Ryan asked, standing up and moving closer to where she sat on the railing. "Have you been looking for someone?" Hannah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Most men in these parts do not want a woman who owns her own business and has her own opinions. They want someone who will stay home and keep quiet, and that has never been me." "Then they are fools," Ryan said firmly. "A woman with her own business and her own mind is exactly the kind of woman worth having. Shows strength and character." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Hannah felt the air between them grow charged with possibility. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge this pull she felt toward him, but before she could find the words, Mrs. Patterson called from inside that lunch was ready. The moment broke, but the feeling remained, simmering just beneath the surface as they ate sandwiches and talked about everything and nothing. Ryan told her about his work on the rocking R, about the beauty of the high country and the challenges of moving cattle. Hannah told him about her boarders, the interesting characters who passed through Snowflake, and her dreams of one day expanding the boarding house to include a small restaurant. "That would be wonderful," Ryan said enthusiastically. "You are a great cook, and Lord knows this town could use more good food options." "You have only had one sandwich," Hannah pointed out, pleased by the compliment despite herself. "Best sandwich I have had in months," Ryan said firmly. "The food at the ranch is filling but not particularly tasty. Cookie does his best, but he is better with beef and beans than anything fancy." After lunch, Ryan went back to his repairs while Hannah attended to her regular duties. She had linens to wash, rooms to clean, and accounts to balance, but she found herself constantly distracted by the sound of hammering from outside or the glimpse of Ryan through a window. He worked steadily through the afternoon, fixing the gate, patching a hole in the back fence, and starting on the leak in the roof. When evening came and the light began to fade, Hannah invited him to stay for supper, and Ryan accepted with obvious pleasure. They ate together in the kitchen, just the two of them since Mrs. Patterson had gone to visit a friend and the other boarders were out for the evening. The intimacy of the setting was not lost on either of them, and conversation flowed as easily as water. "Tell me about your parents," Ryan said as they washed dishes together, him drying while she washed. "What were they like?" Hannah smiled at the memory. "They were wonderful. My father was a teacher and my mother took in sewing. They were not wealthy, but we were happy. They taught me to read and write, to think for myself, to be kind but not weak. When the cholera came through, they made sure I was safe even though it cost them their own lives." "They sound like remarkable people," Ryan said softly. "They were," Hannah agreed. "I wish they could have known my uncle better, could have seen what he did for me. He did not have to take in a 16-year-old orphan, but he did, and he never made me feel like a burden." "You could never be a burden," Ryan said with such conviction that Hannah looked up at him in surprise. "You barely know me," she pointed out. "I know enough," Ryan said, setting down the dish towel and turning to face her fully. "I know you have a good heart. I know you are brave enough to run a business on your own in a territory that is not always kind to women. I know you show compassion to creatures who cannot help themselves. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, Hannah Zimmerman." Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Ryan could hear it. "You see a lot in one day's acquaintance." "Sometimes you just know," Ryan said quietly, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, warm and gentle, and Hannah found herself leaning into the touch. "This is crazy," she whispered. "We just met." "I know," Ryan agreed, but he did not pull away. "But it does not feel crazy, does it? It feels right." It did feel right, terrifyingly right, and when Ryan leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, Hannah instead tilted her face up to meet his. The kiss was soft and sweet, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent electricity racing through Hannah's entire body. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I should go," Ryan said, though he made no move to leave. "I do not want to compromise your reputation." "There is no one here to see," Hannah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "That is not the point," Ryan said, though his hand was still cupping her cheek. "You deserve to be courted properly, Hannah. You deserve flowers and buggy rides and time to get to know me without feeling rushed or pressured. I may be just a cowboy, but my mama raised me to treat a lady right." The fact that he was thinking of her honor when she could still feel the warmth of his lips on hers made Hannah fall a little bit in love with him right then and there. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "Wild horses could not keep me away," Ryan promised. He kissed her once more, lingering this time before reluctantly stepping back. "I will be here at first light to check on Scout and continue those repairs. And Hannah, thank you for today. It has been the best day I have had in a very long time." "For me too," Hannah admitted, walking him to the door. She watched from the porch as Ryan mounted his horse and rode off into the gathering darkness, one hand raised in farewell. When she could no longer see him, she went inside and checked on Scout, who looked up at her with knowing eyes. "Your owner is a good man," she told the dog, stroking his soft ears. "I hope you know how lucky you are." Scout's tail thumped in agreement, and Hannah laughed softly before heading to her own room. She lay in bed that night replaying every moment of the day, from the first sight of Ryan on her porch to the feeling of his lips on hers. It was reckless and foolish to develop feelings so quickly, but her heart had never been particularly good at listening to logic. True to his word, Ryan appeared at first light the next morning with a bouquet of wildflowers he had obviously picked himself. They were a bit crushed from the ride, but Hannah thought they were the most beautiful flowers she had ever seen. "I know they are not much," Ryan said, looking almost shy as he handed them over. "But I passed a meadow on the way here and thought of you." "They are perfect," Hannah said, breathing in the sweet scent of the blooms. She arranged them in a jar of water and set them on the kitchen table where she could see them while she worked. Ryan spent the morning finishing the roof repair and starting on the stuck door, and Hannah found excuses to bring him water or check on his progress far more often than necessary. They talked while he worked, sharing stories about their childhoods and their dreams for the future. Hannah learned that Ryan wanted to have his own ranch someday, a small spread where he could raise cattle and horses and build a life. Ryan learned that Hannah had always wanted to travel, to see the places she had only read about in books, but that she loved Snowflake and could not imagine leaving permanently. "Maybe you could do both," Ryan suggested, pausing in his work to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Run the boarding house most of the year and travel during the slow season." "That would require having someone I trusted to watch over the place while I was gone," Hannah said, "and finding someone like that is not easy." "Maybe you will," Ryan said, his eyes twinkling. "Or maybe you will find someone to travel with you, someone who would love to see the world at your side." The implication made Hannah's pulse quicken, but before she could respond, one of her boarders, Mr. Chen, came downstairs looking for his breakfast. The moment passed, but the promise of it lingered. The next several days fell into a comfortable pattern. Ryan would arrive early, spend time with Scout checking his healing paw, then work on repairs around the boarding house. Hannah would go about her daily tasks, but would take breaks to sit with Ryan and talk. They shared meals, stories, and increasingly, kisses stolen in quiet corners when no one was watching. Mrs. Patterson watched their courtship with approval, often finding reasons to leave them alone or inviting the other boarders on outings so that Hannah and Ryan could have privacy. Scout's paw healed steadily, and by the end of the first week, the dog was walking without a limp and seemed back to his old self. "I suppose I should take him back to the ranch," Ryan said one evening, though he looked as reluctant as Hannah felt. They were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset, Scout dozing at their feet. "I suppose you should," Hannah agreed, leaning against Ryan's shoulder. "I do not want to stop seeing you," Ryan said, turning to look at her. "These past days with you, Hannah, they have been the happiest I can remember. You make me want things I thought I had given up on." "What things?" Hannah asked softly. "A home," Ryan said. "A family. A future with someone who sees me for who I am and likes me anyway." "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time, but I am falling in love with you, Hannah Zimmerman. I cannot help it and I do not want to." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I tried not to, tried to tell myself it was too soon, too risky, but my heart would not listen." Ryan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears that had spilled over. "I do not have much to offer you," he said honestly. "I have some savings and I am good at what I do, but I am not a rich man. I cannot give you fancy dresses or a mansion or trips to Europe." "I do not want those things," Hannah said firmly. "I want someone who treats me as an equal, who respects my mind as much as my heart. I want someone who will work beside me to build a life together. I want someone who makes me laugh and holds me when I cry. If you can give me those things, Ryan Rawlings, Then you can give me everything I need." The kiss they shared then was deep and passionate, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know people will think we are crazy, but marry me anyway. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of the trust you are placing in me." "Yes," Hannah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and purple, and made plans for their future. Ryan would continue working at the Rocking R for now, saving every penny he could. Hannah would keep running the boarding house, building her business and her savings. In 6 months, when Ryan had enough saved and the busy season was over, they would get married in Snowflake's small church and begin their life together. It was a practical plan, but their love was anything but practical. Ryan rode out to see Hannah every Sunday, his one day off from the ranch, and they would spend the entire day together, sometimes going for long walks through the countryside, sometimes just sitting on the porch talking for hours. Ryan brought her small gifts when he could afford them: a pretty ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he thought she would enjoy, a carved wooden box for her jewelry. Hannah saved every letter Ryan sent her during the week, romantic declarations written in his careful, slightly clumsy hand. She would read them before bed, smiling at his descriptions of life at the ranch and his dreams for their future. She wrote back just as faithfully, telling him about her boarders and the improvements she was making to the house and how much she missed him between visits. The people of Snowflake watched their courtship with interest and approval. Ryan had a good reputation as an honest, hard-working man, and everyone liked Hannah for her kindness and competence. When word spread that they were engaged, the town's ladies began planning the wedding, offering to help with everything from the dress to the flowers to the food. Hannah's wedding dress was made by Mrs. Patterson and 3 other ladies from the church, a beautiful creation of white lace and satin that fit her perfectly. Ryan bought a new suit, dark blue with a crisp white shirt, and polished his boots until they shone. Scout, who had become something of a mascot for their romance, would attend the ceremony wearing a ribbon around his neck. The night before the wedding, Hannah lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind racing with excitement and a little bit of fear. She was giving herself to Ryan completely, trusting him with not just her heart but her future, her business, her entire life. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As if sensing her thoughts, there was a soft knock at her door. Hannah rose and opened it to find Mrs. Patterson standing there in her nightgown, a candle in her hand. "Could not sleep either?" the elderly woman asked with a knowing smile. "Too much on my mind," Hannah admitted, stepping aside to let her in. They sat together on Hannah's bed and Mrs. Patterson took her hand. "Are you having doubts?" "No," Hannah said immediately, then paused. "Maybe small ones. Not about Ryan or my love for him, but about whether I am ready for such a big change. What if I am not a good wife? What if I cannot balance the boarding house and a marriage? What if you are exactly as wonderful as you have always been, and Ryan is blessed beyond measure to have you?" Mrs. Patterson interrupted gently. "Child, you have been running this boarding house on your own for 2 years. You have managed finances, handled difficult guests, made repairs, kept the books, and still found time to be kind to everyone who crosses your path. If you can do all that, you can certainly be a good wife to a man who adores you." "How do you know he adores me?" Hannah asked. "Because I see the way he looks at you," Mrs. Patterson said. "Like you are the sunrise after a long, dark night. That young man would walk through fire for you, Hannah, and unless I am very much mistaken, you would do the same for him. That is what marriage should be built on, not fancy things or social position, but genuine love and respect. Hannah hugged the old woman tightly. "Thank you for everything you have done for me, for believing in me, for being here." "It has been my pleasure," Mrs. Patterson said, patting her back. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long, wonderful day." The wedding took place on a beautiful April morning in 1883, 6 months to the day after Hannah had first found Scout injured in the rain. The church was packed with well-wishers, and spring flowers decorated every available surface. Hannah walked down the aisle on the arm of the town's mayor, who had agreed to give her away, and her eyes never left Ryan's face. He looked devastatingly handsome in his new suit, his dark hair combed back neatly, but it was the expression in his eyes that made Hannah's breath catch. He looked at her with such love, such awe, such complete devotion that she felt tears threatening to spill over. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful. They spoke their vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryan's kiss was tender and sweet, and the congregation erupted in applause. The celebration afterward was held at the boarding house, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by everyone in town. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy, and through it all, Hannah and Ryan could not stop touching each other, as if they needed the constant reassurance that this was real, that they were truly married. As the sun began to set and the guests started to leave, Ryan pulled Hannah aside to the back porch where they had first confessed their love. Scout was there too, lying contentedly at their feet. "Happy, Mrs. Rawlings?" Ryan asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Hannah said, leaning back against him. "Though I am keeping Zimmerman for the boarding house, people know that name, and I do not want to confuse my regular guests." "I would not dream of asking you to change it," Ryan assured her. "You built your reputation with that name, and you should keep it. Besides, I think it is rather modern and forward-thinking to have a wife who keeps her maiden name for business. Shows people what a progressive fellow I am." Hannah laughed and turned in his arms to kiss him. "I love you, Ryan Rawlings." "I love you too, Hannah Zimmerman Rawlings," he said, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy and his injured dog." "Thank you for seeing something in me worth staying for," Hannah replied. They stood there in the gathering darkness, holding each other and planning their future, while Scout dozed peacefully beside them. It was the perfect end to a perfect day, and the perfect beginning to their life together. The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Ryan continued working at the Rocking R during the week, but he moved into the boarding house on the weekends, and they were working toward the day when he could quit the ranch and help Hannah run the boarding house full-time. They had discussed expanding, perhaps adding the restaurant Hannah had always dreamed of, and Ryan's savings combined with Hannah's were starting to make that dream seem possible. Their life was not without challenges. There were times when Ryan was gone for weeks during cattle drives, and Hannah would lie awake at night worrying about his safety. There were times when the boarding house had problems that needed more money than they had to spare, and they would have to make difficult choices about what to fix first. But through it all, their love remained strong, deepened by the challenges they faced together. In the fall of that first year, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryan on one of his Sunday visits, pulling him into their bedroom and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, watching his face carefully. Ryan's expression went through several rapid changes: shock, confusion, understanding, and then pure, radiant joy. He let out a whoop that probably startled everyone in the house and lifted Hannah off her feet, spinning her around carefully, before setting her down and dropping to his knees to press his face against her stomach. "Hello in there, little one," he said softly. "I am your papa, and I already love you more than anything." Hannah ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes filling with happy tears. They had talked about children, of course, but she had not expected it to happen so soon. Still, the idea of having Ryan's baby, of building a family with him, filled her with an excitement she could barely contain. "I need to find a way to be here more," Ryan said, standing up and pulling her close. "I cannot be away for weeks at a time with you carrying our child." "What if something happened and I was not here?" "Nothing will happen," Hannah said, but she appreciated his concern. "But I agree that I would feel better having you close by, especially as I get further along." The next day, Ryan rode to the rocking R and gave his notice. His boss, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Patterson, no relation to Mrs. Patterson, was sorry to see him go but understood. Ryan worked 2 more weeks to help find and train his replacement, and then he was done with ranch work for good. Coming home to the boarding house full-time felt like a homecoming for Ryan. He threw himself into the business with enthusiasm, handling the heavier repair work and taking over some of the financial management to ease Hannah's burden. Together, they started planning the restaurant expansion, drawing up designs and getting estimates from builders. Hannah's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to work for as long as she could, but as she grew larger, Ryan and Mrs. Patterson insisted she rest more. The other boarders, who had become like family, pitched in to help with daily tasks, and the whole house buzzed with excitement over the coming baby. On a warm June evening in 1884, Hannah went into labor. Ryan, who had remained calm and collected through every crisis they had faced, completely panicked. He ran for the doctor, nearly fell down the stairs twice, and generally got in everyone's way until Mrs. Patterson firmly but kindly kicked him out of the bedroom and told him to wait downstairs with Scout. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Ryan feared he might lose both Hannah and the baby. He paced the parlor wearing a path in the rug, praying harder than he ever had in his life, while Scout whined in sympathy from his corner. Just before dawn, a baby's cry rang through the house, and Ryan stopped pacing, his heart in his throat. Mrs. Patterson appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, strong boy, and Hannah is fine, just exhausted. You can come up now." Ryan took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom to find Hannah propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale, but her eyes shining as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly, and Ryan approached on shaking legs. The baby was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny fingers that wrapped around Ryan's thumb when he offered it. Ryan felt something in his chest crack open, a love so fierce and immediate that it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is beautiful," Ryan whispered, unable to look away from his son's face. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Hannah asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Ryan knew exactly what felt right. "How about Samuel, after my father? Samuel Patrick Rawlings." Hannah smiled. "I love it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world." Little Samuel was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily, and Ryan proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Samuel for hours if the baby was fussy, would change diapers without complaint, and would sit and stare at his son with wonder on his face. Hannah fell even more in love with her husband watching him with their child. The boarding house thrived with both of them running it full-time. They hired a young woman named Kate to help with the cleaning and cooking, which freed up Hannah to focus on the business side and allowed her to spend more time with Samuel. The restaurant expansion began in the fall, and by the following spring, they had a small dining room attached to the boarding house serving breakfast and dinner to guests and locals alike. Hannah's cooking became well known throughout the territory, and people would travel from neighboring towns just to eat at Zimmerman's boarding house and restaurant, as it was now called. Ryan managed the books and handled maintenance, and together they built something they were both proud of. Samuel grew into a happy, energetic toddler, and Scout appointed himself the boy's guardian, following him everywhere and sleeping beside his crib every night. The bond between dog and child was beautiful to watch, and Ryan would often joke that Scout had better instincts as a parent than he did. "That is not true," Hannah would say, watching Ryan patiently teach Samuel to stack blocks or look at picture books. "You are a wonderful father." "I am learning," Ryan would reply, "but I have a good teacher." When Samuel was 2 years old, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with joy but also a bit of trepidation, as they now knew how much work a baby could be. Still, they prepared excitedly, and when their daughter Rachel was born on a snowy December night in 1886, their family felt complete. Rachel was a calm baby, the opposite of her active brother, content to sit and observe the world around her with serious gray eyes that reminded Hannah so much of Ryan's. Samuel was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help feed her or bring her toys, and Scout transferred some of his protective instincts from the boy to the baby. Life was busy and chaotic and absolutely wonderful. The boarding house and restaurant continued to do well, allowing them to hire more help and giving Ryan and Hannah more time to spend with their children. They saved carefully, planning for the future, and talked about maybe buying some land outside of town where the children could have room to run, and where Ryan could raise a few horses like he had always wanted. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ryan surprised Hannah by taking her to see a piece of property about 2 miles outside of Snowflake. It was 20 acres of beautiful land with a creek running through it and cottonwood trees providing shade. "I bought it," Ryan said, watching her face carefully. "Or rather, we bought it. I used our savings. If you are angry, I will understand, but I wanted to do something special for our anniversary, and I thought maybe we could build our dream here. A house for our family, a barn for horses, maybe even expand the boarding house operation if the town grows this direction." Hannah walked the property slowly, taking in the gentle roll of the land, the sound of water over rocks, the way the mountains looked in the distance. It was perfect, absolutely perfect, and when she turned back to Ryan, she was crying. "These are happy tears," she assured him quickly. "This is the most wonderful gift you could have given me. I love it." They spent the next year planning their house, drawing up designs and making changes until it was exactly what they wanted. Construction began in the spring of 1888, and by fall, they were able to move in. The house was modest but comfortable, with 3 bedrooms upstairs, a large kitchen and parlor downstairs, and a wide front porch perfect for sitting and watching the sunset. They kept the boarding house in town, with Mrs. Patterson, who was now in her 70s but still sharp as a tack, overseeing it with Kate's help. Hannah would go into town 3 days a week to check on things and manage the books, while Ryan worked on building up their small horse ranch on their property. Scout, now an old dog with a graying muzzle, loved the new property and would spend hours lying in the shade watching Ryan work with the horses. Samuel, now 5, was his father's constant shadow, learning everything he could about horses and ranching. Rachel, at 3, preferred to help her mother in the kitchen or play with the dolls her father had carved for her. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm when, in the summer of 1889, Hannah discovered she was pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and at 31, Hannah found herself more tired and uncomfortable than she had been before. Ryan worried constantly, hovering over her and insisting she rest more than she wanted to. "I am not made of glass," Hannah would protest when Ryan tried to take over all the household chores. "I know," Ryan would reply, "but you are precious to me and I am allowed to worry about the woman I love." How could she argue with that? Their third child, another son they named Joseph, was born in February of 1890, and this time there were complications. Hannah hemorrhaged after the birth, and there were several terrifying hours when the doctor was not sure she would survive. Ryan sat beside her bed, holding her hand and praying with an intensity that scared Samuel and Rachel, who had been told their mother was very sick. But Hannah was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she pulled through. The doctor told them that she should not have any more children, that another pregnancy might kill her, and both Ryan and Hannah accepted this news with mixed feelings. They had 3 beautiful, healthy children, and that was more than many people had. Still, there was a bittersweet quality to knowing their family was complete. Joseph was a sweet baby with Hannah's brown hair and Ryan's gray eyes, and he seemed to have inherited the best qualities of both his siblings: Samuel's energy and Rachel's calmness. Scout, now very old and moving slowly, would still position himself near the baby's cradle, determined to protect one more Rawlings child. The old dog passed away peacefully in his sleep one night in the fall of that year, and the entire family mourned. They buried him under the cottonwood tree by the creek, and Ryan carved a marker that reads Scout, faithful friend and family guardian. Samuel cried for days, and even Ryan, who had known this day was coming, found himself tearing up at unexpected moments. "He was a good dog," Hannah said, holding Ryan as they stood by Scout's grave. "The best dog. And if he had not been injured that day, if you had not come looking for him, we might never have met." "I think about that sometimes," Ryan admitted. "How one moment, one seemingly random event, can change your entire life. If Scout had not stepped on that glass, if you had not been the kind of person to take in an injured stray, if I had not come to your door looking for him, none of this would exist. Our children would not exist." It is humbling and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "I prefer to think it was not random," Hannah said. "I prefer to think it was meant to be, that we were always supposed to find each other, and Scout was just the method fate chose to bring us together." "I like that better too," Ryan said, kissing the top of her head. They got another dog eventually, a puppy they named Scout Jr., though he was called Junior to avoid confusion. Samuel took charge of training him, using all the things he had observed from the original Scout, and soon Junior was just as devoted to the family as his namesake had been. The years passed in a blur of activity and love. The boarding house and restaurant in town continued to thrive, becoming a cornerstone of Snowflake's growing community. Their horse ranch grew slowly but steadily, with Ryan developing a reputation for training gentle, reliable mounts. Hannah started teaching Rachel how to cook, passing down recipes and techniques, while Samuel worked alongside his father learning horsemanship. Joseph grew into a curious, adventurous child who somehow managed to get into more trouble than his siblings combined. He was always climbing something he should not, exploring places he had been told were off limits, or bringing home injured animals he had found and insisting they needed help. Hannah would laugh and shake her head, seeing so much of both herself and Ryan in their youngest son. When Samuel was 10, he asked his father about his grandfather, the first Samuel Rawlings, and Ryan spent an entire evening telling stories about his father. He told Samuel about how his grandfather had been a fair but firm rancher, about his skill with horses, about his love for Scout, and his dying wish that Ryan find a good woman to settle down with. "Did you think Mama was that good woman right away?" Samuel asked. Ryan smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "I thought she might be," he said. "The way she cared for Scout, not knowing who he belonged to or if anyone would ever thank her, that told me she had a compassionate heart. And when I got to know her better, I realized she was not just a good woman, but the perfect woman for me. Your Mama challenges me, Samuel. She makes me think and grow and be better than I would be without her. That is what you should look for someday, someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself." Hannah, listening from the doorway, felt her eyes fill with tears. After more than a decade of marriage, Ryan could still make her heart flutter with his words. The children grew and changed, and so did Ryan and Hannah. The hard work of their youth gave way to a more comfortable middle age. They hired people to help with the boarding house and the ranch, allowing them more time to focus on family. They traveled occasionally, taking the children to see Phoenix and Tucson, and once making a grand trip to San Francisco that the children talked about for years. Rachel inherited her mother's head for business and started helping with the books when she was just 12, showing an aptitude for numbers that delighted Hannah. Samuel became an excellent horseman, able to gentle even the most spirited mount, and at 15, he started helping his father train horses for sale. Joseph, ever the adventurer, talked about becoming an explorer or a soldier, ideas that made Hannah's heart clench with worry even as she encouraged him to dream big. In 1900, when Hannah turned 42 and Ryan was 44, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary with a party at their ranch. Friends and family came from all over, including Mrs. Patterson, now in her 80s and still going strong. The party was loud and joyful, full of music and laughter, and as the sun set, Ryan pulled Hannah onto the makeshift dance floor and held her close as they swayed to a slow waltz. "You have any regrets?" he asked softly. Hannah leaned back to look at him, taking in the silver starting to thread through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, the weathered hands that had built so much of what they had. He was not the young cowboy who had knocked on her door all those years ago, but he was even more handsome to her now, his face showing the character and strength that had only deepened with time. "Not a single one," she said honestly. "You. Only that I did not meet you sooner," Ryan said. "That we could not have had more years together." "We will have many more years," Hannah said firmly. "We are not done yet, Ryan Rawlings. We have grandchildren to spoil and business to run and a whole life still to live." "To many more years then," Ryan said, spinning her under his arm and pulling her back close. "To many more years with the woman who saved my dog and captured my heart." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the life they had built together. And Hannah thought about that rainy October day in 1882, when an injured dog had limped onto her porch. She thought about the young cowboy who had come looking for him, about the instant connection she had felt, about the risk they had both taken in loving each other so quickly and so completely. It had not been an easy life, but it had been a good one, full of love and purpose and joy. And it was not over yet. Samuel married at 21 to a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Ryan and Hannah their first grandchild, a little girl named Hannah, in 1903. Rachel married at 23 to a businessman from Phoenix named Thomas, and they had twin boys the following year. Joseph, true to his adventurous nature, joined the army, and wrote long letters home about his travels and experiences. Ryan and Hannah eased into grandparenthood with enthusiasm, loving on their grandchildren and passing down stories of the old days. They officially retired from the boarding house business when Hannah was 50, selling it to Kate, who had worked for them for years and knew the business inside and out. They kept the ranch, though Samuel did most of the actual work now, and spent their days enjoying the fruits of their labor. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch, Ryan in his rocking chair and Hannah in hers, watching the sun set over the mountains and talking about everything and nothing. Junior, now an old dog himself, would doze at their feet, and they would hold hands across the space between their chairs. "Do you remember the day we met?" Hannah asked one such evening. "Every detail," Ryan said. "You were wearing a gray dress that was soaked from the rain, and your hair was falling out of its pins. You had the most compassionate eyes I had ever seen, and when you looked at me, I felt like I had been struck by lightning. I thought you were the most handsome man I had ever met," Hannah admitted. "And when you talked about Scout, about how much he meant to you, I knew you were someone special. Someone worth taking a chance on." "Best chance you ever took?" Ryan asked, a teasing note in his voice. "The only chance I ever needed to take," Hannah said firmly. "Everything good in my life came from that one rainy day when I chose to help an injured dog. You, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, all of it traces back to that moment of simple compassion." "I think about that sometimes," Ryan said, "about how close we came to never meeting. If Scout had not been injured, if I had not come looking for him, if you had been out when I knocked on your door, so many things could have gone differently. But they did not," Hannah said. "We found each other and we built something beautiful together. That is what matters." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, when they needed it most. Their love story had begun with an act of kindness to a stranger's dog, and it had blossomed into something neither of them could have imagined in their wildest dreams. Ryan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1918, at the age of 62. He simply did not wake up one morning, and while the doctor said it was likely his heart, Hannah liked to think he had simply decided he had lived a full, wonderful life and was ready to rest. She held his hand and cried, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, and mourned the loss of her greatest love. She lived another 6 years without him, spending her time with family and sharing stories about their life together. She never remarried, never even considered it, because, as she told Rachel, there was only ever one Ryan Rawlings, and he had been more than enough for one lifetime. Hannah passed away quietly in her garden in the summer of 1924, tending the roses Ryan had planted for her on their 20th anniversary. She was 66 years old, and she died doing something she loved, in the home she and Ryan had built together. Her children and grandchildren gathered to mourn her, but they also celebrated, because Hannah Zimmerman Rawlings had lived a life full of love and purpose and joy. They buried her beside Ryan under the cottonwood trees by the creek, not far from where old Scout rested. Their grandchildren carved a marker that read, "Here lie Ryan and Hannah Rawlings, who found love in the most unexpected way and built a legacy that will endure for generations. Together in life, together in death, together in love forever." And on rainy October days, when the wind blew just right through the cottonwood trees, locals swore they could hear laughter and see two figures walking hand in hand by the creek, an old dog trotting faithfully at their heels. Whether it was ghosts or just wishful thinking, no one could say for certain, but the people of Snowflake liked to believe that some love stories were too strong to end, even in death. The boarding house in town operated for another 50 years under various owners before finally closing its doors in the 1970s. But the building still stood, a reminder of the woman who had run it with competence and compassion. The ranch was passed down through Samuel's line, and his great-great-grandchildren still raised horses there, continuing the tradition Ryan had started over a century before. And sometimes, when those great-great-grandchildren were tucked into bed, their parents would tell them the story of how it all began, with a rainy day, an injured dog, and two people brave enough to recognize love when it found them. They would tell them about Hannah's compassion and Ryan's devotion, about the life they built together and the family they created. And the children would fall asleep dreaming of true love and happily ever afters, knowing that such things were not just fairy tales but real possibilities if you were kind enough, brave enough, and lucky enough to find them. The legacy of Ryan and Hannah Rawlings was not measured in money or land, though they had left both to their descendants. It was measured in the values they had instilled: compassion, hard work, courage, and above all, love. Every member of their family knew the story of the stranger's dog and the cowboy who offered his heart, and they carried those lessons forward into their own lives, creating their own stories of love and adventure and belonging. In the end, that rainy October day in 1882 had changed more than just two lives. It had created ripples that spread out through time, touching generation after generation, a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring nature of true love. And if Scout could have known, from wherever dogs go when they leave this world, how his injury had set in motion such a beautiful chain of events, he surely would have thumped his tail in approval and considered his purpose well served. This was how love stories were supposed to end. Not with a dramatic flourish or a tragic parting, but with a life well lived, a family well loved, and a legacy that would endure long after the main players had taken their final bows. Ryan and Hannah Rawlings had found their happily ever after not in a moment, but in the accumulation of moments, days, and years spent building something beautiful together. And in the end, that was more than enough.